Thank you very much. Welcome everybody to Japan House London's latest webinar. My name is Simon Wright. I am the Director of Programming at Japan House London. And this is the first in a short series of events which looks at Mashiko and is really in commemoration of the 100 years since the establishment of the Leach Pottery in St Ives, which has a very strong connection with Mashiko in Tochigi Prefecture. And today's session is a celebration of Hamada Shōji and Bernard Leach. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Just to go through a few rules so that you understand how our webinar works. Your microphone and webcam, if you're watching, it will be disabled for the entire duration. And please use the Q&A feature, which is situated at the bottom of the screen, to type any of the questions for any of our speakers. You can do this at any time throughout this session, and you can remain anonymous if you so wish to, or please do ask the question using your name. The questions will be collated by Japan House moderators, and a selection will be answered live during the event, but we'll set aside some time right at the very end for most of these questions. Please note that all the contents of this event will be streamed live on Facebook and YouTube, where a recording will be archived later. So today, the event is coming to you from London, where I am, and also St Ives in Cornwall, and Mashiko in Tochigi Prefecture in Japan. And as I said before, this is the event which is the first in a short series exploring Japanese studio pottery from the 20th century through to the present day and beyond. And today, to discuss the contributions of Hamada Shōji and Bernard Leach in forging the shape of Japanese-British studio pottery, we are joined by two speakers. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let me introduce both our speakers. First, let me introduce Matsuzaki Yuko. She is curator at the Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art in Tochigi Prefecture in Japan. She graduated with an MA in aesthetics from the University of Tokyo and started working in Mashiko in 2013, launching the Mashiko Museum Residency Program. She has curated many exhibitions, including Vessels, The Spirit of Modern British Ceramics, and Shoji Hamada's Journey to the West. And she writes about contemporary ceramics as a contributor to ceramic magazines. Thank you very much, Matsuzaki-san, for joining us all the way from Mashiko in Japan. Thank you. And our second speaker today is Dr. Matthew Tyas. He is curator at the Leach Pottery in St Ives in Cornwall, here in the UK. His responsibilities include curation, interpretation, programming, research, and exhibitions. And he has recently focused on delivering the Leach Pottery's centenary celebrations for 2020 and 2021. His interest in pottery began over 20 years ago, collecting pots, and soon grew into making them. From early on, he was drawn to aspects of the Leach pottery, the Leach legacy, forgive me, and this led him to a PhD involving the Leach pottery and the application of digital technologies from a craft maker's perspective. He has recently contributed to the Whitechapel Gallery's current exhibition, Kai Althoff Goes with Bernard Leach, and his next piece will be for The Modernist, about the Leach pottery's original standardware pottery. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us today. Today's session will involve two presentations, and at the end we will have an opportunity for questions and discussion, time allowing. Please do submit your questions. So first of all, may I ask Matsuzaki-san from Mashiko to start us off with her presentation, and she will be aided by our interpreter today, Bethan Jones, who you will also hear. So thank you very much, Matsuzaki-san. If I could hand over to you. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm Yuko Matsuzaki, a curator of Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art in Japan. As you know, this year, 2020, was the 100th anniversary of Bernard Leach and Shoji Hamada's arrival in St Ives, England. Festive events were being prepared for both Mashiko and St Ives, but they were hit by a dreadful epidemic of the new coronavirus infection. At the Mashiko Museum of Ceramic Art, a special exhibition started in England, Hamada and Leach in 2 ways, was held from June 28th to November 8th. Fortunately, we were able to hold an exhibition even in this pandemic situation, and we were able to finish it safely the other day. However, we would like to have welcomed more visitors from all over the world. Under such circumstances, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to Japan House London for preparing such a wonderful online event, which is a kind of fruit of the coronavirus situation. I'd like to thank Matthew Tyas for speaking today and Simon Wright for promoting this project and all the staff of the Japan House London. And thank you to everyone who came to listen today. I'll be grateful if you could learn a little about Shoji Hamada, Bernard Leach, and Mashiko's pottery, Mashiko's ceramics. From here, my presentation will be in Japanese. If you have an interpreter, the talk will not be smooth, but in order to tell my content precisely in a short time, let me talk in this way today. And I'll speak in Japanese from here. 本日私は、益子焼の始まりから現在の状況までについてお話しします。その中で浜田庄司やバーナード・リーチについても触れていきたいと思います。
Today I'm going to be talking about Mashiko ceramics from their origins to the present day, and as part of that I'll be talking about Hamada Shōji and Bernard Leach.
ここでは主に4つに分けてお話しします。はじめに益子焼の始まり、次に浜田庄司と益子の個人陶芸について、さらに益子焼の発展、最後に益子焼の現状について少し触れます。
My presentation will be in 4 parts. I'll start by talking about the beginnings of Mashiko ceramics, then about Hamada Shōji and studio pottery in Mashiko, then about the development of Mashiko ceramics, and finally the Mashiko ceramics today.
本題に入る前にそもそも益子という土地がどこにあるのかお伝えしたいと思います。益子は首都東京から北に約100キロ、東京から車で約2時間のところにある小さな町です。栃木という県の南東部に位置しています。この大都市東京から比較的近いという立地が益子焼の歴史を決定づけていきます。
Let me start by explaining to you where Mashiko actually is. It's a small town about 200 kilometers north of the capital, Tokyo. 100 kilometers north of the capital, Tokyo, about 2 hours drive in the southeast of Tochigi Prefecture. And this proximity to the capital has played an important role in the history of Mashiko.
益子焼の始まりは1853年、日本の暦でいうと、江戸時代の末期に隣接する茨城県の笠間で作刀修行をした大塚慶三郎という人物が始めました。わずか160年しか歴史のないとても若い焼き物です。その笠間焼は信楽焼の流れを組んでいるので、益子焼のルーツは笠間焼や信楽焼ということができます。
Mashiko ceramics began in 1853. In the end of the Edo period. They started with a person called Otsuka Keizaburo, who had studied pottery making in Kasama in the neighboring Ibaraki prefecture. It's a relatively new ceramics. It only dates back 160 years. And Kasama ware, is in the tradition of shigaraki ware, and so we can say that Mashiko ceramics have their roots in kasama ware and in shigaraki ware.
江戸から明治時代になると、益子は東京から最も近い養業地として、東京方面に向けて日用陶器を量産して輸出する産地として発達していきました。
Moving from the Edo period into the Meiji period, and as the pottery production center closest to Tokyo, Mashiko starts to mass produce daily ware for daily pottery for daily use, which it ships to Tokyo.
で以後、益子焼は19世紀後半から現在に至るまで、人々の生活スタイルの変化とニーズに合わせて、作る器の種類を変えながら今日まで続いています。益子独自の造形や作風を継承していくというよりは、流行に合わせて変化していくというところに益子焼の大きな特徴があると言えるでしょう。
Since then, from the late 19th century through to the present day, Mashiko has produced pottery that meets the lifestyle needs of people in Japan. It doesn't have a particular form or style that is passed down, but rather what distinguishes Mashiko ware is the way that it adapts to the trends of the day.
初期益子焼、つまり近代の19世紀後半から20世紀初頭の益子焼についてご紹介したいと思います。益子は壺、亀、皿、土鍋、すり鉢といったいわゆる台所用品を大量生産する産地として展開していきました。その中でよく生産されていた代表的なものがこちらに出ている土瓶です。
If we take a look at early Mashiko ware from the late 19th century through to the beginning of the 20th century, Mashiko produced jars, pots, plates, pans, mortars, mass production of kitchenware. And one of its most well-known products was, as you can see here, the dobin earthenware teapot.
写真では少し分かりにくいかもしれないんですけれども、昔の益子焼はとても薄くて軽くて、土もきめ細やかな焼き物です。スピーディーに大量生産、そして使い捨てされる雑器だったので、一点物のように重厚に作られていた焼き物ではなかったということです。同時に当時の益子には焼き物を薄く作ることができるろくろ技術と適度にきめ細やかな土があったということも意味していると私は考えています。
It's hard to tell from these photographs, but back then Mashiko ware was very thin and light and made from a fine clay. This was so that it could be mass produced with speed, and it was also somewhat, the pieces made were somewhat disposable. They weren't one-of-a-kind pieces that a lot of reverence went into the manufacture. At the same time, this did mean that Mashiko had the necessary Mashiko potters had the necessary technique and skill with the wheel to be able to produce these thin pieces, and that they also had a suitably fine clay to produce them, and that is also significant.
土瓶が大量生産されていた時代は、1日に約1000個の絵付け、絵をつけることですけど、をしていたというふうに言われています。
When these dobin teapots were being produced, it said that 1,000 were being decorated a day.
次に、1930年の浜田庄司登場以降の益子の個人陶芸の発展についてお話しいたします。
Let's move on now to the arrival of Hamada Shōji in Mashiko and studio pottery there after 1930.
浜田庄司さんは、自身が77歳の時に抹茶碗の展覧会を開催 しました。で、その図録に次のような言葉が書かれています。私の陶器の仕事は京都で道を見つけ、英国で始まり、沖縄で学び、益子で育った。
At the age of 77, Hamada Shōji held an exhibition of matcha tea bowls. And in the exhibition guide, he wrote the words that you see here. In my pottery work, I found my path in Kyoto, started in England, learned in Okinawa, and then cultivated it in Mashiko.
このフレーズは浜田さんが晩年に自分の半生を回顧して表現した有名な言葉です。実に的確にコンパクトに自分の陶業をまとめています。浜田庄司はバーナード・リーチと同様に遍歴の多い陶芸家です。国内外に出かけてはその土地土地の工芸や美術を吸収する、その活動自体が彼の創作の根幹を成しています。
This is a well-known quote where Hamada looks back over his life. And I think it really sums up his journey in pottery very succinctly. As was the case with Bernard Leach, Hamada Shōji was a well-traveled potter. He traveled within and outside Japan, absorbing the arts and crafts of every place that he went to, and this formed the basis of his creativity.
ここで、彼の初期の経歴について概観しておきたいと思います。浜田庄司さんは益子生まれの作家ではなく、1894年、神奈川県川崎で生まれました。東京高等工業学校、現在の東京工業大学ですけれども、で、窯業を学んだ後、1916年から京都市立陶磁器試験場で技術者として勤めています。
If we take a look at the early career of Hamada Shōji, he wasn't born in Mashiko. He was born in 1894 in Kawasaki, in Kanagawa Prefecture. He studied at the Tokyo Higher Technical School, which is now the Tokyo Institute of Technology, where he learned how to use a kiln. And from 1916, he went to work as a technician at the Kyoto Ceramic Research Institute.
で、この時期に浜田はリーチに出会うことになります。
And it's during this time that Hamada encounters Bernard Leach.
で、そして1920年にリーチがイギリスに帰国し、コーンウォール州のセントアイブスに製陶所を作る際に一緒にイギリスに渡りました。
And when Leach goes back to the UK in 1920 to set up his pottery in St Ives in Cornwall, Hamada goes with him.
で、セントアイブスでのその3年間の作陶の成果をロンドンにあった、パターソンズギャラリーで発表します。これが陶芸家浜田庄司の初個展です。つまり浜田庄司はイギリスで陶芸家デビューをしたということになります。
The results of Hamada Shōji's 3 years working in St Ives were exhibited at an exhibition at Patterson's Gallery in London. This was his first solo exhibition as a potter, and so we can say that Hamada Shōji made his debut in the UK.
しかし、この1923年の9月に日本で関東大震災が起きます。そのことがきっかけで浜田庄司は帰国の途に就くことになりました。そして1924年に栃木県益子に入ります。
However, in September of the same year, the Great Kanto earthquake struck, and this resulted in Hamada deciding to go back to Japan. In 1924, he goes to Mashiko in Tochigi for the first time.
そして1930年に、家を購入して本格的に益子作陶拠点としました。
In 1930, Hamada buys a house in Mashiko and establishes himself as a Mashiko-based potter.
1923年の浜田庄司初個展について触れておきたいと思います。この展覧会は日英両方の近現代陶芸の歴史を考える上でとても重要な意義があります。
Let's take a look now at that first exhibition of Hamada Shōji's in 1923. This exhibition plays an important role in the modern and contemporary histories of ceramics in both Japan and the UK.
浜田庄司はこの展覧会でセントアイブスのリーチ工房で制作した壺や水差しなど80点ほど出品します。浜田がイギリスで作った作品は主に2つのタイプに分けられまして、一つはイギリスの伝統的なガレナ釉を用いた英国風の軟質陶器。もう一つは中国などの東洋風の陶磁器の意匠をあしらった作品です。こちらのスライドに載せたのは初個展出品作品ではありませんが、同時期に浜田が制作していたものですので、雰囲気は感じていただけるのではないかなと思います。
In the exhibition, Hamada exhibited around 80 pieces, jugs, jars, vases that he had made at the Bernard Leach Pottery in St Ives. They could be divided into roughly two types. The first was English-style earthenware using a traditional galena glaze, and the second was more Eastern style ceramics using a Chinese type design. Now, these pieces here aren't from that exhibition, but they are pieces that Hamada made around the same time. And so you get the idea of what he was making.
この右側の写真は浜田庄司初個展の案内状です。で浜田の初個展はほぼ完売という大成功を収めたというふうに言われています。浜田庄司26歳の時のことです。東洋から来た当時は無名の青年による焼き物の展覧会がどうしてここまで注目されたのでしょうか。
The photo on the right is a flyer for the exhibition. It said that Hamada's first solo exhibition was a big hit. It sold out, and he was only 26 years old. Why was this unknown potter from the East such a big draw?
で一つには19世紀終わり頃からヨーロッパの、陶磁器愛好家たちの間で起きた中国陶磁ブームが挙げられます。発掘された古い焼き物に通ずるような、ろう抜きや刷毛目といった陶芸の技法が当時の現役作家による生きた表現としてなされていた。その点に受け手たちは独創性を感じたわけです。でパターソンズギャラリーはいわゆる純粋美術を扱うギャラリーでした。で浜田庄司の作品が美術として大変なインパクトを持って受け入れられたということが伺えます。
First reason is that at the end of from the end of the 19th century, European ceramic lovers had been very much interested in Chinese ceramics and porcelain. They were interested in the way that contemporary potters were using techniques such as wax resist and brush mark slip to recreate and to bring back to life some of the effects you would find on ancient pots. And they were impressed by the creativity that this displayed. Also, the fact that Patterson's gallery was really a gallery that focused on fine art, which meant that Hamada Shōji caused quite an impact in the art world.
では浜田庄司が益子で行った仕事はどのようなことだったのでしょうか。浜田の益子時代の作品の大きな特徴ですけれども、このスライドの中央にあるようなこの柔らかな焼き上がりというものを感じていただけますでしょうか。
Let's take a look at what kind of work Hamada Shōji produced in Mashiko. Firstly, one of the distinguishing features of his work there can be seen in this photograph in the center of the slide, this soft baked feel that it has.
この素朴でぬくもりがあってぼってりしていて重厚感があるっていう雰囲気は浜田庄司の作風を表す形容詞なんですけれども、今日の益子焼のイメージと重なるものではないかなというふうに思います。
We can describe Hamada's work in Mashiko as simple, warm, plump, with a certain heft. And I think this can be said of the work that we see coming out of Mashiko today.
でこれは先ほどお話しした薄作りの初期益子焼とは随分異なる印象のものです。浜田の焼き物造形表現が益子という産地の焼き物の現在の印象とほぼ重なっているという点は今ここで改めて指摘しておきたいと思います。
It's very different from the work that the wear that we saw previously coming out of Mashiko, that very thin, those very thin pieces. But it's worth noting here again that the work that Hamada Shōji produced in Mashiko does have a certain overlap with what we see coming out of Mashiko today.
それともう一つ、浜田庄司の作品は決して技巧的ではなくシンプルな技で美しく見せています。そして表現はシンプルですが着想源は多様であるということも重要です。
It's also important to note that Hamada's work was not very technical. It was beautiful, but it was simple. And he took his inspiration not from one place, but from a variety of places.
浜田庄司はそのセントアイブスでの作陶について英国では日本風の楽焼きもやってみたができても何か調子がぴったりせず英国風のガレナ油を作ることには容易に成功した。やはりどこの国にも土地に合う薬というものがあると思ったというふうに振り返っています。
Hamada Shōji said that when he was working in the UK, he tried to use Japanese glazes, but it didn't work somehow. But that he found it very easy when he was based in the UK to use the British-style Galena glaze. This made him realize that there are certain materials, certain glazes that suit certain locations.
土地固有の素材を使うということの重要性というイギリス体験の中での気づきが浜田庄司のスタイルの根幹にあります。つまり益子の土と釉薬を使って古今東西の焼き物のエッセンスを咀嚼して精神性の高い作風へと昇華させたというのが浜田の仕事の本質と言えるでしょう。
This realization that there are materials, that there are glazes that suit a certain location, and the importance of that, it formed the basis of Hamada's style. And so he used his experiences of ancient, modern, Eastern, and Western, and used the clay and glazes of Mashiko to turn all of these into something of a more spiritual nature.
はい、ここからは浜田が益子に入ってからの益子の近現代陶芸の発展、個人作家の系譜の展開についてお話ししたいと思います。ちょっと時間がないので少し短縮してお話ししますが、今日その益子焼という名称が世界的に知られた焼き物のブランドになったのは大戦後の1950年代以降のことです。益子焼は日用の雑器から鑑賞陶器まで作るようになり、台所から床の間へ出世したというふうに言われたりもします。
I'd like to look now at the development of Mashiko ceramics after Hamada Shōji sets himself up in Mashiko and the lineage of studio potters from there. I'm going to have to skip over some of the slides because I realize I'm short on time, but it was after the war in the 1950s that Mashiko became a recognized name and a brand in pottery. It was when it started moving away from making items for daily use to making items for appreciation. It was said that it had been promoted from the kitchen to the alcove.
それからですね、益子に限ったことではありませんが、その歴史の浅い産地においては、個性の強い個人作家の存在がそのまま産地のカラーになるということが少なくありません。例えばアメリカで言えばピーター・ボーコスの存在が当てはまるのではないかと思うんですけども、そしてイギリスのスタジオポタリーにおけるリーチ派の形成も、その現象とみなすことができるのではないでしょうか。
And while this isn't something unique to Mashiko, it's been the case with many of the newer pottery production areas that the area will take on the color of a particularly strong individual studio potter. That has been the case with Peter Volkos in the United States and also with a lot of the Leach style potters in the UK.
で、ここに出てるのは浜田庄司の、弟子たちが作った作品ですが、彼らによって益子は民芸陶器の里というイメージが強く定着していくことになります。
These are some pieces produced by students of Hamada Shōji, and because of his status, Mashiko took on the role, took on the image of being very much a Mingei folk craft pottery center.
しかしながら民芸の一言でくくれるほど益子の陶芸は単一的ではありません。力のある個人作家に引き寄せられるようにして、特に1970年代以降、実力作家たちが切磋琢磨しながら育っていきました。
But the work coming out of Mashiko was by no means uniform enough to be pigeonholed into the Mingei category. It attracted a lot of strong individual studio potters and from in particular in the 1970s, these potters worked alongside each other and rubbed up against each other to develop their own styles.
で、最後に益子の現在の状況について少しだけ触れたいと思います。浜田庄司も亡くなって、40年が経つんですけれども、必ずしも浜田庄司のことを知っているとは限らない世代の作家たちというのも出てきています。 ですが、先ほども申し上げました通り、作られて、益子は流行に即して変化していくというのが益子のスタイルですので、現在も作られているものは実に多様化していると言えると思います。
Finally, I'd like to take a brief look at Mashiko today. It's been 40 years since Hamada Shōji passed away, and there are now potters in Mashiko who maybe don't actually know about Hamada Shōji. But as I've said earlier, what makes the work coming out of Mashiko distinctive is the fact that it changes with the trends, it changes with the fashions, it adapts. And in this way, there is now a huge diversity of work coming out of Mashiko.
最後にこの、オンラインイベントのテーマである浜田とリーチの関係に即して、リーチが親友浜田庄司という一文の中で浜田庄司の仕事をどのように評価していたのかを紹介して終わりにしたいと思います。
Because part of the topic of this event is the relationship between Hamada Shōji and Bernard Leach, I'd like to finish my presentation by sharing some words that Leach wrote about Hamada Shōji.
まずは多彩な着想の源泉についてですね、浜田庄司の作品からリーチは浜田自身の素質によるのみならず、東西両文化の影響を受けながら、しかも主体的に選択した結果であるということを読み取っています。そして西洋の投稿から見ると、浜田の造形感覚の中には日本、朝鮮、中国はもとより他の諸外国の伝統も受け継がれていることがわかるというふうに述べています。
As you can see here, Leach wrote about the multiple sources of inspiration used by Hamada Shōji. He said that his ability was not only due to his own innate qualities, but also the result of the selections that he made when he was exposed to different Eastern and Western cultures. As a Western potter, he could see that Shōji had inherited the traditions of Korea, China, and beyond.
もう一つは浜田庄司の創造性、クリエイティビティの意義を指摘しています。古今東西に及ぶ浜田の豊穣な着想源に加えて、さらにはそれらを結合して生きた形、色、生地、様式を新たに生み出した彼の才能の重要性を挙げています。そのクリエイティビティが20世紀半ば以降の益子やイギリスの焼き物の新しい道を切り開いていったと言えるのではないでしょうか。
Leach also said of Hamada's creativity that not only did he have all these sources of inspiration, but more important was his talent for combining them to create new shapes, colors, textures, and style. And this creativity, it can be said, has really influenced and opened up a path for creativity in pottery from the late 20th century onward in both Mashiko and the UK.
以上、私からの発表を終わりにしたいと思います。ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Matsuzaki-san. Wonderful. How extraordinarily interesting. Thank you. Please, if you're watching, please remember to submit your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We will be able to address your questions at the end of these presentations. So thank you very much. We are now joined by Dr. Matthew Tyas from St Ives in Cornwall. Dr. Tyas, if I can hand over to you, we look forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simon. So I'm going to start by looking at basically the last century of the Leach pottery to give a bit of context, the early years and the connections with Japan, the site and its kilns, and the Leach pottery production that we do today. And I'm going to start with this object, which is a relatively new acquisition to the collection, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. And it's Bernard Leach's plans for the original Leach pottery. And I think this really personifies Leach because it kind of shows how he likes to document and communicate things, often through sketches. And obviously his drawing of pots is well known, and then making those pots three-dimensionally And in the same way, you can sort of see him working through the Leach Pottery site. And here we have the plans for the kiln room. So essentially, it's a long shed, it's open on one side. And the kiln here is what the researcher Peter Smith describes as a Japanese folk kiln. And so he kind of feels that Hamada had done a lot of research around different designs of Japanese kilns, and then use this research as a basis to develop this design here. And it will be a climbing kiln. And you can also see in that plan there's sort of little notations of where the saggers would go, where the wood would be piled for the kiln and so forth. And in fact, in the next room, there's a fireplace in the top left-hand corner. And if you just kind of scan to the right-hand side of the image, you'll see that there's actually living quarters built in there. So in the top right-hand corner, there's a space for a bed with a little dresser. And on the opposite side, in the bottom corner, there's a desk and living quarters. So the building wasn't just for producing pots. This is in fact where Hamada lived for 3 years. And it was quite an austere experience, really. The pottery itself was built from scratch, and it was considered the last building of its kind made in St Ives using vernacular methods and techniques. And of course, then the paper plan becomes a three-dimensional model of the pottery. So, I mean, it's just an absolutely beautiful thing. And then just sort of moving on, here we have Hamada by the fireplace. Again, a fascinating kind of description of the times. In the bottom right-hand corner, you'll notice a table made to Leach's design. And we're very lucky to currently have that on display at the pottery. It's on loan from the family. Just to give you an idea of what things were like then, you'll notice on the table that there's a candle, and there's also candle holders on the fireplace there. So there's no electricity. And it's very cold. It's very cold today in the old pottery. So I can't imagine what it would have been like in the early 1920s, and the only source of heat being the fire. And in fact, when Hamada left, Michael Cardew also then went on to live in that area. And there's a story that he used to bathe every day in the Stenach, which is a river which runs down the side of the pottery. It might have been a little bit too brutal for him, because apparently he ended up in hospital for a while with pneumonia. So here we have kind of a view of the part of the kiln room. And this is the first raku kiln. So Bernard Leach was introduced to pottery through taking part in a raku party in 1911. And essentially, you know, who'd have thought that 10 years later, they would have been sort of building a raku kiln and making raku. So on the left there, we have Hamada. And I'm not kind of quite sure if they are building or rebuilding the kiln here. And on the right-hand side, you can see that they're up firing the kiln. There's Bernard Leach in the corner. But actually what they did was, this was more like became a low temperature kiln. So you would have slipware in the bottom, and then you would be able to add a raku to the top and then remove it. And this is an example of some of the early raku ware. I think it's an absolutely beautiful little object. It really gives a sense of the process and the fire and the life in it. So the main flux in there would be lead, and you can see that the color response is very bright. So this is a traditional sort of style of Japanese raku, in that it's oxidized, as opposed to that kind of post-war Western tradition where it's reduced and you tend to get a sort of slightly different color palette. And then this is the kiln that Hamada built. And this is probably a point where it's been repaired and rebuilt. And you can kind of see the top left-hand corner, there's some saggers there. And then in the foreground, you have the firebox. So you have an area where you would insert the fuel, which is wood in this case. And then you have, in the lower part of the box, the area for dealing with ash and the main air inlet for combustion. And then on the right-hand side, you might just be able to see some wood that's been stacked up. And here is Matsubayashi. So Hamada met Matsubayashi at the Kyoto Ceramic Research Center. So that's where Hamada was teaching and Matsubayashi was a student. So Matsubayashi came from a family of potters and had a great sort of technical background. And part of his research at the Institute was to survey the kilns in Japan. So he had quite a lot of knowledge. And essentially when Hamada was preparing to leave for his exhibition in London, that was essentially the last time that this kiln was fired, because it was kind of getting to the end of its life. So they had a few technical problems with that. And Matsubayashi was sort of invited to help sort of solve some of those problems. You can kind of see here also in the fireplace, there's some traditional English slipware featured and some Tang Dynasty Chinese figures as well. And some beautiful plans there for the kiln. There are kind of descriptions at the time that the way that the pottery ran was somewhat haphazard. Matsubayashi was a little bit more serious and technical. And you can kind of see here in this diagram that he wanted to pin down very precisely what the nature of the kiln was. And here we have a nice little shot of the kiln, probably in the late 40s, early 1950s. As you have Bernard Leach on the left, and in the middle there is his son, David Leach, his eldest son. David kind of was a real driving force behind changing the pottery, particularly from 1937. And David kind of helped to introduce standard wear, certain modifications to the kiln and so on. And this is an example of a pot by Leach, which came out of the three-chamber climbing kiln. And you can kind of see that there's a difference between the earlier wares that it was making. So the raku ware is smaller in scale, somewhat more spontaneous in decoration, brighter in colour. And then through the decades, you can see that Leach's work pares down, and there's sort of more of a reverence, I would say, to the sung standard that he would talk about in a potter's book. And then just sort of moving on to the Leach Pottery site in a wider context, I just wanted to show this picture of the sign and the sort of beautiful hand-carved features there, which I suspect Hamada would have done. And this is an outside shot of the site. So I would date this to after 1927, possibly up to the late 1930s, early 40s. What's interesting about it is that Pottery Cottage is yet to be extended. So that's the building on the right. And then the building on the left is the kiln shed. And if you kind of look at the profile of the building, you can see that it's been extended and enlarged. And that's the detail that you wouldn't notice on today's site. So it's kind of, the site's developing and growing. And you also notice that the sort of arts and crafts style features over the windows are absent in later years. And this is what the site looks like today. So you have the Pottery Cottage on the right, which is now a Grade 2 listed building. And then to the left of that building is the Cube Gallery. And then the building on the far left, you can see the profile of the old pottery there. The entrance gallery in the foreground, and then to the back of the sides are the studio's contemporary premises. And the building on the far left was added to the original pottery workshops as well. So we think that kind of came online probably again early 1940s, late 30s, and that housed extra equipment that David Leach had brought in to facilitate standard wear production, and the upstairs was where Bernard's studio was. And just to kind of give you a taste of what we're doing today, the Leach Pottery, this is an example of the contemporary standard wear that we make. And it's what I would describe as a living tradition. So we kind of not in the mind to reproduce what we do in the past necessarily, but to kind of respond to context, culture, materials, and the interests of the creative spirit of the artists and the potters who work at the pottery, to make something that's fit for purpose today. And so this is an example of reduction fired stoneware, and then also porcelain. And then just to give you a sense of some of the potters that we have. So we have Rulof, who's our lead potter. And I'm just going to feature some of Rulof's work and the rest of the team. And these were pots that were made for an exhibition this year to celebrate the centenary. And this is Matthew Foster. And this is Britta. Matthew is our second contemporary apprentice and has become our production manager. And Britta is originally from Germany. I should also say that Rulof is from South Africa originally. And we have Callum, who's our first Leach sea salt apprentice, and Annabelle Smith, who has very recently completed her apprenticeship and has been enjoying a solo exhibition. And just to kind of a little turn of the wheel there, this is the Leach Pottery site at a point where Hamada returns with his family to visit Bernard and Janet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Tyas. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Such evocative photographs from 100 years ago and nearer. Matsuzaki-san, could I ask you to come back on? Thank you very much. So we have a few minutes left for questions, and lots of questions coming in. So I will start straight with the questions that are coming in from our viewers, because they're flocking in. And put your hands up if you want to answer, or I might direct it first of all. This first question, okay, is did Bernard Leach and Hamada Shōji make pots together in Japan before they traveled to the UK in 1920? And if so, and in what context? And attached to this is another question: why was Leach in Japan? And how did they meet? Maybe Matsuzaki-san?
そうですか。じゃあ、
1920年より前に、一緒には、そうですね、基本的には一緒に作ってないと思いますが、浜田さんはその、バーナード・リーチさんの、個展で作品を見て、東京の個展で。で、その次の年に実際にもう一度個展があった時に、そこで本人に会ってっていう経緯があります。
I don't think Leach and Hamada made pots together in Japan before 1920. Hamada visited Leach's solo exhibition in Tokyo, which is where he first encountered his work. And then the following year, there was another solo exhibition which Hamada went to again, and this time he actually met Leach.
で、バーナード・リーチさんは、いわゆるラフカディオ・ハンに憧れて、日本に来日してるんですけれども、もともとは焼き物ではなくて、ドローイングとかエッチングとかその平面の作品を作る人だったんですけれども、日本に来たことによって、焼き物の世界に出会ったということですね。
Leach had come to Japan because he loved Lafcadio Han. And he actually started out in 2D art, not in pottery, but in drawing and in etching. But after coming to Japan, he encountered the world of ceramics and pottery.
Did Leach speak Japanese? Is part of the question.
リーチ日本語話せたんですか？
あ、はい。お話できます。
Yes, yes, he did.
Wonderful. Thank you very
Mm.
much. Thank you very much, Matsuzaki-san. We have another question here. This is from Nicole Lister. Did Hamada bring some of the Leach glaze recipes back with him to use, or did he revert to the glaze recipes of the area, or did Hamada reinvent his own glaze recipes to better fit with the local clay? This, I think, may be for Matsuzaki-san.
浜田さんは、リーチの釉薬のレシピとかを日本に持って帰ってきたんですか？それともその土地の益子のものを使い始めたのか？それともこう自分が前から使ってた釉薬を益子の土に合わせて作り直したのかっていう質問です。
ちょっとすいません。正確なことはお答えできないんですけれども、ただ浜田庄司さんはその京都の陶磁器試験場時代に、1万種類の釉薬実験をしたと言われていまして、知識が非常に豊富にあった人なんですね。なので、その益子の、釉薬とか土を、より洗練させるっていうことをやったんではないかなという、その素材に合ったやり方で材料を良くしてたのではないかなというふうに思います。
I don't know exactly, but I do know that when Hamada was working at the Ceramic Research Institute in Kyoto, he is said to have experimented with about 10,000 glazes. So he had a real wealth of expertise and knowledge when it came to glazes. And so I imagine that when he went to Mashiko, he applied his expertise and made the best use of materials that suited the clay and the ingredients available in Mashiko.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Tyas, I have a couple of questions coming, I think, maybe for you directly. One question, this is from Major. Do you think that Bernard Leach really needed Hamada's technical knowledge to build the St Ives pottery?
Yes, without a doubt. I think that without Hamada, it would have been very problematic. And you kind of get the sense that Hamada was more hands-on. And even, say, 3 years later, Matsubayashi is kind of quoted as recognizing that sort of Leach kind of needs practical help and assistance. And I think that over the years, Leach kind of came to become more embedded in sort of that practical knowledge and expertise. And that the approach to St Ives also to some degree was that kind of autodidactic, we need to learn by doing. So sometimes I think there was also a degree of quite self-consciously trying to find out for yourself rather than necessarily doing things practically on the basis of research and findings.
Okay, thank you very much. We also have another question for you here as well. Matthew. It's thanking from an anonymous attendee. Thank you for this wonderful event. So thank you very much, both of you. But Matthew, can I ask, could Leach pottery produced today be considered Mingei?
I think that's a really good question. Perhaps a wider question is, can any pottery produced by someone who is a self-aware artist be considered to be Mingei? That is kind of how I would approach it. And I don't have an incredibly deep knowledge of the meaning of Minge, but my understanding is that Unagi had several rules for it, which was kind of a commonly produced artifact by an unknown maker that's in kind of a mass use. I think that's kind of vaguely some of the facets of it. So I'm not sure really in a contemporary society if it's entirely possible to fulfill some of those criteria. It depends how you define it.
Okay, thank you very much. Minge is often associated with Japanese ceramics in general as well, and often with the work of Hamada, I suppose, in Mashiko. This is for you as well, Matsuzaki-san. A question here we have from Gianfranco. How is Hamada's work and style of pottery seen in the context of Japanese pottery with a longer history? And how is Bernard Leach's work considered in Japan today?
浜田庄司の作品やスタイルは日本の陶芸の歴史の中でどう、見られてますか。そしてバーナード・リーチの、陶芸が今どう日本で、見られてますか。
ですね、ちょっと私個人の見方になるかもしれないんですけれども、浜田庄司や例えば河合勘次郎といったいわゆる民芸派と言われる、近代の作家たちがいるんですけれども、彼らの作品っていうのは例えば造形がどうかとかなんていうかそのスタイルがどうこうっていうことではなく、やはりその民芸という言葉、民芸というフィルターでくくられることが多くて、あまり例えば浜田庄司の造形思考は何だったのかとか、そういったことっていうのはむしろこれから研究されるところなのかなというふうに考えております。
Well, this is just my personal opinion, but I think that potters like Hamada Shōji or Kawai Kanjiro, who have the Minge label attached to them from the modern era, tend to be seen through the Minge filter. So rather than looking at their creativity, their form, their style, we see them as Minge. And I think that area of what was his actual artistic intention is something that there could be more research into.
それからバーナード・リーチについてもなんですけれども、リーチや例えば富本健吉という作家は近代陶芸を日本の近代陶芸を考える上でとても重要なんですけれども、作品自体の作風がどうかとかそういったことの研究っていうのはこれからもっと必要なのかなと思うんですが、ただ浜田庄司もそうなんですけれども、個人陶芸ですね、陶芸家意識みたいなものの芽生えというのを考えたときに非常に重要な役割を果たしていった作家たちと言えるのではないかと思います。
And the same goes to an extent for Bernard Leach and people like Tomimoto Kenkichi, these potters who've played a very important role in modern ceramics. We're aware of them for the role they played, but not so much necessarily for their actual individual styles. But they have, as Hamada Shōji has, played an important role in the development of studio pottery in Japan.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, indeed, thank you. We're a little bit over, but I think we have time for one last question before we finish. And if we could answer maybe very quickly and it's for both Matsuzaki-san and for Dr. Tyas, really. Is it clear what Hamada's influence was on Leach? It is clear, it seems, but is it clear what was the influence of Leach on Hamada?
お二人の質問ですけれども、浜田のリーチへの影響は明らかかと思うんですけれども、リーチの浜田のへの影響は、見てわかりますか？
Who would like to maybe answer?
Oh, I'll start. I mean, it's just a personal opinion. I kind of feel that Hamada's influence on Leach is that Hamada had a strong technical underpinning, but was also seeking kind of a high degree of freedom in his work as well. So sort of in that spontaneous nature of decoration and making. So I think that you can kind of see that in the earlier work, and in the other context, I'm not sure how Leach influenced Hamada, but one of the things that I think he did do was allow Hamada the opportunity to become a potter and to create a context for that to happen in a different culture and a different country. And of course, that had that whole experience had a massive impact on Hamada and what he went on to do.
Okay, thank you. Matsuzaki-san.
多分その作風スタイル上のその影響っていうのは直接目に分かるような形ではあまりないのかなと思うんですけれども、ただ浜田さんとリーチさんってお互いの仕事のことを非常によく深く理解しているなと思っておりまして、先ほど最後に紹介したリーチの親友浜田庄司というテキストも非常に浜田の仕事を的確に捉えていますし、逆に浜田さんもリーチのことを非常によく分かっていたのではないかと思いますので、その、表面というよりか内面的なところでの非常に互いの影響関係というのはあったのではないかなというふうにとかもコレクションとか工芸とかものに対するスタンスとかそういったところで影響し合ってるんじゃないかなというふうに考えています。
I'm not sure that there was a direct visible influence from either side in terms of style, but I do think that Hamada and Leach had a deep understanding of each other's works. As we saw at the end of my presentation, Leach wrote about his best friend Hamada and about his work in that. So I think that rather than a superficial influence, I think they influenced each other at a deeper level, and that they influenced each other's stances on collecting and on ceramics in general.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Unfortunately, we have come to the end already of this extraordinarily fascinating webinar. This is not the end of the story. This is the first in a series of our looking at the work of ceramics in Mashiko in Tochigi Prefecture. So thank you so much indeed for starting us off. I can see we have to revisit this. We have so many more questions that we can't unfortunately answer. They're all flooding in at the end here, but we're going to have to finish, I'm afraid. We can see that that Mashiko is not only Hamada as well. There's so much more, and Matsuzaki-san gave us a little glimpse, I can see, of maybe what we will be able to see in the future. So we look forward to that very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Dr. Tyas, for introducing us to the Leach Pottery, and congratulations on 100 years this year. I can see you'll be celebrating into next year as well. Yes, is that right? We had a wonderful comment that came in just after Matsuzaki-san's presentation. So Matsuzaki-san, you've inspired this gentleman. His name's Alan. He says he doesn't really have any questions, but your presentation, Matsuzaki-san, explained everything beautifully. And he wanted to say that he is going to St Ives on Friday, and you've given him something to enhance the entire experience. And then the question is the pottery open on Friday, Matthew?
I believe, no, it's not open this Friday, but I think the shop might be open from next week onwards when our lockdown comes to a close.
Okay, wonderful. So when that happens, please do visit, for those of you in the UK. For those of you, of course, who have the opportunity to visit Mashiko as well, please do. It is a wonderful place. Thank you so much. Just to let you know, if you were not able to see the whole of this webinar, or you were unable to join us, that viewers will receive a follow-up message from Japan House after this event with links to watch the webinar on Facebook and YouTube, so you won't miss anything at all. It will be recorded, and we'll also be sending a feedback form to all our viewers. Thank you so much indeed. Just a couple of things from Japan House London. We open to the public on Thursday, and our exhibition, which has been on hold during lockdown, is reopening. It's Architecture for Dogs. Admission is free, but you need to book. This runs until January. Please do check the website in order to be able to book, and also to have a look at where we will be able to do the Architecture for Dogs Roadshow as well, which will be visiting various places in London. Please do also check our website for more events, including the follow-up events for Mashiko. Once again, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Dr. Tyas. Thank you so much for joining us from St Ives. And Matsuzaki-san, thank you so much for joining us from Mashiko in Japan. We look forward to continuing the series in 2021. Many thanks indeed. Please stay safe and look after yourselves. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much.